Imagine waking up one morning and everything you know, your phone, your car, even the electricity in your house, just doesn't work. Now imagine it's not just you, not just your neighborhood, but the entire planet. No lights, no internet, no escape. What happens to humanity when the world goes dark forever? This is the story of the day the earth fell silent. It started as a whisper, a strange rumor that spread faster than anyone could comprehend. Governments dismissed it, scientists scratched their heads, and conspiracy theorists celebrated as their worst fears came true. But when the blackout hit, there was no denying it anymore. Something had gone terribly wrong, and life as we knew it was over. What you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a warning. It began on an otherwise normal Tuesday morning. The first sign was subtle. Phones refused to turn on, computers froze in place, radios hissed with static. People assumed it was a power outage or maybe a solar flare. But by noon, panic set in. Cars stalled on highways, planes vanished from radar, and even wristwatches stopped ticking. The world was plunged into an eerie, unrelenting silence. Within hours, the realization hit. This wasn't a glitch. This was everywhere. Cities that once buzzed with life now sat in darkness, their towering skylines as dead as tombstones. And it wasn't just technology failing. It was as if electricity itself had disappeared. At first, people tried to adapt. Candles replaced light bulbs, bicycles replaced cars, and neighbors gathered around dwindling supplies of food and water. But as days turned into weeks, the cracks in society began to show. Hospitals could no longer function. Crops withered without automated irrigation. And without refrigeration, food spoiled faster than it could be consumed. In the small town of Willow Creek, a man named Daniel became an unlikely leader. A mechanic by trade, he'd always been good with his hands, but even he couldn't explain what was happening. All he knew was that survival depended on action. Daniel organized nightly meetings by firelight, urging the townspeople to work together. They hunted, foraged, and rationed what little they had. But as the days grew colder and the nights stretched longer, desperation began to set in. People whispered about what might have caused the blackout. Was it an EMP attack, a punishment from God, or something even darker? Then came the lights. One night, as the town gathered around a communal fire, a strange glow appeared on the horizon. At first, they thought it was the moon, but it moved too erratically. Daniel and a few others decided to investigate. Armed with flashlights that didn't work and weapons they barely knew how to use, they ventured into the woods. What they found defied explanation. Dozens of strange, orb-like objects hovered in the air, pulsating with a sickly green light. They seemed alive, almost sentient, and they emitted a low, droning hum that made the ground tremble. Daniel reached out to touch one, but before he could, it darted away, disappearing into the darkness. When they returned to the town, they found chaos. People were screaming, running in every direction. The lights had followed them back, and now they hovered over the town, casting long, eerie shadows. And then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they vanished. The next morning, the first deaths were reported. People who had been exposed to the lights began to show strange symptoms. Their skin turned pale, their veins darkened, and their eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Some claimed they could hear voices whispering to them, urging them to do unspeakable things. One by one, the infected began to disappear. Some wandered into the woods, following the lights. Others simply vanished from their homes, leaving behind only faint scorch marks where they had been standing. Daniel realized they couldn't stay in Willow Creek any longer. The town was cursed, and whatever was happening was spreading. He led a group of survivors on a harrowing journey across the countryside, seeking refuge. Along the way, they encountered other towns, all suffering the same fate. In one village, they found a young girl who claimed to know the truth. She spoke of beings from beyond the stars, creatures that fed on electricity and were now feasting on humanity's fear. "They've always been here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Watching, waiting. We made it easy for them. We gave them our world." But the most chilling part of her story was what she said next. "The blackout isn't the end. It's just the beginning." Daniel and his group never found out if the girl was telling the truth. They never found a safe place either. The lights continued to follow them, always just out of reach, but close enough to remind them they weren't alone. Humanity's greatest strength had become its greatest weakness. We had built a world dependent on machines, and when those machines failed, we were left with nothing. The Earth didn't need an apocalypse to end us. It just needed silence. Want more stories like this? Hit subscribe or check out the next video if you dare.